Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at another vehicle on the dev server, and this is the Lancaster MR.7. This one was actually in the files on the last dev server, but it seems like they've decided to add it to the French tree. Now the naval portion of France is coming into CBT. So what is the difference between the Lancaster MR.7 and the other Lancasters that we already have in the game? Well, this is kind of one which was used by France post-Second World War as a marine reconnaissance vehicle. So one which is generally used to kind of make sure that the seas are alright and also the coasts are covered, and to kind of report back in roles to try and, keep stuff in check. Very similar to the Shackleton and other vehicles like that. So that means a lot of it has kind of been stripped out, and instead of it being a bomber, it's more designed for recon. So for example, the weaponry that is on this thing is definitely less than what you see on the other Lancasters. It has a dual 50 cal in the back in a turret, and then also it has a dual set of 7.7mm in the front, and that's it for defense. So those Lancasters, which are already in the game, don't have a ton of defense. Well, this one has even less. So that obviously sucks. You're going to have to rely on the speed of the vehicle to be the most useful. It does, though, have access to a radar, which is pretty interesting. Don't know if it works in the game or not, or if it will work in the future in the game, but it would be really nice to see it working. Since it would be quite useful being a naval radar. Then you have all of the pilots in the front. You actually have two of them, surprisingly, up here. If you have a look at the good old Lancasters, which are the same BR for Britain, you can see here that the pilots are actually sat side to side on each other, or at least on the Mark 1, and obviously more of the turrets on the back, whereas on the France one, they are actually sat in, I suppose you'd class it as a parallel position. So yeah, pretty interesting on that setup, and obviously the two gunners in the machine as well. The engines are just the Merlin 28s, so very powerful and will work incredibly well. And of course you have the oil and liquid cooling systems for them too. Now, the other place where this one has changed, since obviously when you're trying to create more of a reconnaissance vehicle or a patrol vehicle, you don't necessarily need as many bombs and stuff like that on it. That's basically meant that it doesn't have access to some of the larger munitions that the Lancasters do now for Britain. Instead, it only has the 1000-pounders, which used to actually be the largest kind of set of bombs that the Lancaster used to carry for the longest time, but then they added the cookies, and now they added even the bigger ones, which are just cookies strapped together. So the French one only gets access to the 1000-pounders, but if I'm honest with you, that's completely fine. This loadout is perfect for taking out bases and air realistic, which is the main place you're going to be able to, or you're going to be using these things to kind of go forward with. So I think that's generally okay. It also has the belts for the two turrets, so you can make them a little bit more useful, even though they're not, going to be as powerful as others, since there's just not too many of them, and then has the engine injection and the EFS and everything like that. We should actually have a look to see if this radar does anything in the game. If it did, that would be really cool, but at the same time, usually this stuff doesn't, which is kind of sad. And you can see here, yeah, there is no use for the radar. It doesn't even pop up. But you can see here, you've got the good old Lancaster position in there, and the color of it is absolutely stunning, may I just say. Big fan of the navy blue that is going on for this vehicle. So this is just a standard Lancaster, really. Like it's basically a Lancaster from 3 to 4 years ago, which would have turned up in the British tech tree, but instead now it's in the French tech tree. And France in War Thunder doesn't really have a ton of incredibly heavy bombers, especially at the higher echelons, and a lot of the tech tree for France is, well, it kind of sucks, if we're honest. A lot of the rank 1, 2 and 3 aircraft are subpar, and even when you get into the early jets, they kind of struggle as well. One of the nice things about a lot of the tech trees is they do have quite a lot of strike aircraft or bombers in them, which people can use to be able to go through it and be able to like grind out, and then you can kind of use those to grind out the fighters, making it a bit easier to be able to get through some of these vehicles. So hopefully, with the addition of the Lancaster, that is kind of the same for France. You know, instead of using stuff like the MB.7, you can maybe use a few other things to kind of grind through the tech trees. You can see here the bomb bay full of the 1000-pounders. And as I said, it's just a perfect bomb load for taking out bases and for doing stuff like that. My survivability rate in the Lancaster is pretty high, generally because I just climb at a degrees away from the battle, and then bomb bases, and then go back to the airfield and just do that over and over again. It works well for me. I understand it's not the best for everybody, but at least for me, it does work. So, looking at the aviation tree, you can actually find it between the PB4Y2 and also the Vautour. So that's where it's going to kind of sit itself. The PB4Y2 gives you a different experience, I suppose, than the Lancaster MR.7. I think I would actually probably take the PB4Y just because you can go gunship mode, which can be super useful for the vehicle and work really well. Whereas with this one, you don't have a ton of defenses, so you can't really do too much with it. But I'm never going to be sad with another Lancaster being added to the game. There is a lot of history on this vehicle and a lot of stuff to really love about it and what it represents, not just from a British point of view, but also from a French point of view. Whether it's a bit of unity or whether it's a bit of other stuff, all I can say is it's just nice to see some more of them in the game. And it's also continuing a pattern which we've seen many times in War Thunder, where they've decided to kind of not go the full copy-paste route with these things, instead of adding in vehicles which are completely the same as other ones, instead slightly changing them up, whether it's with the radar here, which may have a use in the future, whether it's the change in turrets, or whether it's the change in engines or something. It just makes it a little bit different, and therefore gives people a unique experience without really giving them a unique experience. But I don't mind it. I'm happy to see it, and I will have a good time spading it. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Millie Draper, Juan the Panda, Nick R. Cupila, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie B. Young, Peter Grayling, Jerry Provolt, Bareen, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, Derek R. and Lafouche for supporting the channel.